Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Advocacy in Action. I'm your host for today, Liz Byrd, and I'm thrilled to have Kelly Knowles here with me today to dive deep into a critical aspect of your government relations strategy. But first, for our regular listeners, we're all about actionable insights, and for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. This series brings you a direct conversation with leaders to unpack key trends and strategies. So today, our focus is on the vital importance of connecting with the newest faces on Capitol Hill and exploring how proactive engagement with freshman members of Congress can significantly impact your PAC program. So with that, I want to welcome Kelly to Advocacy in Action.
Well, thanks for having me, Liz. I'm thrilled to be here. I serve as a senior political advisor for BIPAC and have over 20 years experience assisting and trade associations and corporations with their political engagement and overall advocacy efforts. And so I'm thrilled to be here today and be a member of the BIPAC team. I also serve as the liaison for the Action Fund, which is BIPAC's political action committee that works to send solutions-oriented candidates from both sides of the aisle to Congress. And so I'm super excited about this discussion today.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, I know I have a lot of great questions for you, so I want to kick it off with asking you to explain why proactively engaging with these newly elected members of Congress is so vital for a PAC's overall strategy and goals.
Right. So with a third of the Senate up every 2 years, and of course, all of the House of Representatives up every 2 years, there is a constant opportunity to form new relationships with members of Congress. And in 2024, there are over 9 new members of the Senate and over 60 new members of the House. And so in total, over 70 freshmen in the House and the Senate, and that's 70 opportunities to form meaningful relationships on behalf of your trade association or your corporation with these new policymakers. And it's so important to cultivate these relationships early on. And when I was thinking about this discussion today, I was reminded of a really terrific quote by former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, who was addressing a board of directors, and he was explaining the importance of doing this very thing, of making PAC contributions, having facility visits, all the things, forming relationships. And he said that throughout the course of his career, he had had so many supporters. And he couldn't remember, obviously, all the people and all the organizations who supported him. But he remembered the folks who were with him from the beginning, who got in early on and formed those relationships. And so I think we have such a great opportunity, as corporate political engagement programs, trade associations on behalf of our members, our corporate members, to form those relationships early, which obviously can help your political engagement programs, but really your overall advocacy strategy and your goals by getting to know these folks. So it's just so important.
That's human connection so important, so I completely agree. I guess since we're already halfway through 2025, would you say it's too late to start this outreach?
It's really never too late. These folks are freshmen for 2 full years, so they just got their sea legs, if you will, when they were sworn in January of this year. So they've been in office, just under 7 months. So they're still learning the ropes, still forming relationships. It is never too late, really, even beyond the first term, to get in with these House and Senate freshmen. So I would say, and especially coming up in August next month with the August recess, there is an incredible opportunity to host some facility visits and meet with those members back in the state and district. So if you haven't, put together a formal freshman strategy, there's still time, and you can start off by doing it back in the state and the district, and then carry that into Washington, D.C. when they're back after recess.
Perfect. So just beyond these introductions that we're making, what would you say are some effective strategies for building genuine and lasting relationships with these members and their staff?
Well, there's so many things you can do, and I had made some notes. First of all, you've got to get a lay of the land, right? Who is your audience? Who are your targets, if you will, for House and Senate freshmen? And so one of the things that the first thing you should do is obviously get a list, right, of all the House and Senate freshmen. And BIPAC has that on the members portal, which is a wonderful resource. And we think, to call that, curate a list like that takes time. If you're a member of BIPAC, you've got it at your fingertips. The other thing that I think is listed on there are committee assignments. which are so important in the House and the Senate, obviously related to whatever your advocacy goals are, the committees that are important to you and your members and your organization. So you really want to take a look at that list, and then you want to match up where you have facilities, where you have corporate headquarters and other locations that are important, where you have a large number of employees who live. And so you really want to create that list and determine, okay, of this over 70 members, what are our top 10 targets in terms of forming meaningful relationships with members of Congress who have been appointed to key committees and represent key facilities for our organization? And so that's where I would start. That's how I would structure it and come up with a top 10 list at a minimum. And then there's so many different ways that you can start to engage these members. Obviously, you want to go by their Capitol Hill office as soon as possible. And you've probably maybe already done that, but if not, it's not too late because they've had such an influx of visitors since January. So it's not too late to get your name in and introduce yourself and your organization. One of the things that's so effective is to bring member product or your organization's product, whatever that might be. I mean, it could be, the food industry, I think, has a little bit of an edge here because they get to bring goodies to the House staff who love to get those kinds of things. I think about Snack International and all the great snack foods that they've put all over Capitol Hill in freshman members' offices and current members, which is really effective, and they love it and they remember it. And members of Congress love to show off products that are made in their state and district. I mean, that's, you walk into a Georgia office and you've got Georgia peanuts and, all kinds of other things, sports memorabilia, whatever. So whatever your organization represents, think about what you could put in the office to represent that with the member of Congress, which is great. So that's certainly one thing. So go by, do a meet and greet. And along the lines of meet and greets, one of the things you can do with a freshman is to host a virtual meet and greet or an in-person meet and greet. And so if COVID gave us anything, it was this new format of Zoom and Teams. And a lot of the freshman members are very amenable to doing these virtual meet and greets. And so you pull together a list of a group of 10 to 15 folks, do a virtual meeting with a member, or do a virtual town hall where you have unlimited participants. But they're always very excited to do those kinds of things. And it's a great opportunity to have an informal discussion and meet with these freshman members, talk about your priorities, learn about their priorities, their path to office, all kinds of things, and they remember it. And I would just, say that one of the most effective ways to schedule those is through the fundraiser, through the Capitol Hill or the in-district, in-state fundraiser. You can also do it through the Hill staff, right? But I find that a lot of times the fundraisers have quick access to schedules. They're happy to do this because they can, form fundraising contacts for down the road. And so they're great to work with. Fundraisers are great people in Capitol Hill and back in the state and district, and they're extremely helpful. So that's a good way to get your members or your top employees or your PAC board in front of these new members of Congress. So really, you've got to be strategic about knowing who your audience is, who are your targets. You want to go in the office and meet with them, bring product of any kind if you can. You always want to leave some sort of takeaway. I wouldn't recommend pages of anything. You don't want to bombard them with paper, but just to leave something small as a takeaway when you visit. So that, doing virtual meet and greets or in-person meet and greets. And then lastly, the third really important part, I think, is to host a visit back in the state or the district in your facility or your corporate headquarters. And so it's so important for members of Congress to understand who they're representing, understand business and industry and what it means to run those operations, have a chance to connect with employees, shake employees' hands, and learn about the issues that impact the bottom line that they deal with every day. So those are what I would say are the three most important ways that you can cultivate these relationships.
No, I love those. And I love what you said about the takeaway, like tying it back to your industry. Because like you said, they're meeting hundreds of people, but they'll remember that one takeaway or how that made them feel. So I think that's a nice connection. I guess switching, how does building new relationships early on with these new members compare to engaging with your already established members?
Well, I mean, it reminds me of the quote, like, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So
Yes.
you've got an opportunity to really form a relationship early on with the member. And I remember years ago, doing a freshman meet and greet and visits with a woman named Jackie Walorski, who was a Republican congresswoman from Indiana. She has since sadly passed away in a tragic car accident, but she was a phenomenal member of Congress. Everything you want in a servant leader. And we had hosted at one of my former organizations a lot of new events for her, in-person meet and greets. It was way before the pandemic. Took product to her office, had her out to facilities where food manufacturing was happening, and she just became a champion for the industry that I represented at the time. And just a terrific woman, and really carried weight on a lot of key legislation, co-sponsored bills that were important. And so really, grew that relationship over the years. And it was such a tragic loss to lose her in Congress, but she was certainly someone that I realized very early on was going to be super important for the organization's goals and advocacy strategy. And so forming that with her early on, and we did all the things, right? We had the in-person meet and greet. We had her to the facilities back in the district, went by and made sure she had member product, and she was extremely helpful to the group during her time in office. And so, hopefully you get a chance to make those relationships. And so they're new and fresh. You've got a lot of these folks who come to Washington, with the best of intentions, very positive, eager to get stuff done. And so one of the things you definitely want to do is make them consider you a resource, right? You always want them to look at you in your office as someone they can trust, and count on for accurate information, and be a resource to them in a number of different ways. So I would say that it's just different because you get a chance to really start fresh, but cultivating and then keeping those relationships going as time moves on is extremely important. So everything that you're doing for the freshman member, you need to keep doing for your champion members in the House and the Senate. Now, obviously, meet and greets are not going to happen because they're well known, but that transitions into hosting fundraisers, making PAC contributions and that kind of thing. But keeping member product in the offices, having them back to the state and district facilities, that never stops. That continues to be important moving forward indefinitely.
I love that. So I know cultivating relationships is important, but it's hard to measure. So what kind of metrics do you use to evaluate the effectiveness of this engagement with our new members?
Well, I think effectiveness, obviously in government relations, that's one of the things we struggle with, right? Is to really measure success, right? Because sometimes things that don't happen, that we stop from happening, are a huge
Yes.
measure of success, right? So it's really hard to quantify in government affairs sometimes what we've actually accomplished, which can be a whole lot, but it doesn't look maybe so sexy on paper. But I would say, obviously having access to a member's office, and I'll go back to Representative Wolarski and others, being able to get a quick response from the chief of staff, being able to call and say, we've got members in town, we want to bring them by, and getting a quick answer, having access. Obviously, co-sponsoring legislation, voting in favor with, we used to do key vote lists all the time. Votes are few and far between, unlike they were 15 and 20 years ago. But those kinds of measurable things are so super important. I would say just the relationship building and having access to members and their staff is a mark that you've been successful with your ability to cultivate these relationships.
I guess also thinking about that, are there any tips you have for doing this at the state level or engaging mid-year after some of the special elections happening?
I mean, I think what applies federally here is very applicable to the state level. I mean, you need to, if you're a state organization or you've got a big state presence, state partners, you should be doing these things on the state level too, with your new assembly members and just back in the States, just on a smaller scale because it's state. Now, if you're California, that's a pretty big state. So, the same thing applies on the state and the federal level, that it's so important to build relationships with new members, new lawmakers and policymakers. And I would even say, just thinking, I know we're focusing on Congress right now, the House and the Senate, but you've got a lot of regulators who are new with the new administration. And so there's an opportunity for those kinds of things too. It's not quite the same. You're not going to put member product in a regulator's office at FDA or whatever, but forming relationships, doing informal meet and greets, setting up meetings, super important on the agency side too. And when you think about the executive branch and all the new players that come to town with the new administration.
Oh, that's a good thing. A good reminder for everyone to be thinking about. Kelly, I have one last question for you. It's my favorite kind of question to ask everyone as we're wrapping things up. But I just wanted to ask, over the years, are there any like lesson learned moments, things that people should be doing, maybe a warning not to do something that comes to mind that you want to share with everyone listening?
Well, there are always lessons learned. Obviously, with member product and cultivating relationships, you always want to check and make sure you're following the rules, right? I don't, thankfully, goodness gracious, don't have a nightmare story or example about that, but there are gift rules. There are rules about product. I know that in order to have product in the office, it must be manufactured in the district. I'm pretty sure about that, but you'll need to check with folks on your team to make sure you're following all the rules. One of the things I would say, and this goes back to fundraising tips and strategies, but I had a CEO at a former organization. His name is Paul Abenanti, and he taught me so many things about not only working for a trade association, but raising money. And his big thing was never make them sad to see you coming. And if you've always got your hand out, if you're always asking for something, people are going to see you and think, well, here she comes, or here he comes again with their hand out asking for something, whether that's to co-sponsor legislation or vote in favor of this. So I think it's so important when you're forming these relationships and trying to get close to new members of Congress. You don't want every time you go to see them or they hear from you that there's an ask. Sometimes it's really great to shoot a message over or stop in and say, just checking to see how things are going. Can we be of help in any way? Dropping off product without an ask. Setting up a meet and greet to meet other members of your industry. I mean, I think that's one of the things associations can do so well when they host these meet and greets for freshman members. It gives others in the industry, the trade industry, and folks who represent different groups a chance to meet. And so not only are you introducing those folks to the member of Congress, but the member of Congress is learning about other industries and making more contacts. So I guess, don't make them sad to see you come, and don't make it every time you visit an ask. That's the key to forming a solid relationship, a very important part, I think.
No, I love that. As a communications marketing person, we always say there's like an 80-20 rule with your asks versus like the
Right.
entertaining content or the
Yeah.
other things. So that totally applies here too. And I love that balancing out the asks because, like you said, you don't want to make them sad to see you come or to post or to send an email or something. So
I
I think
do
that's
want
great.
to add one more point that I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure I made that I think is important, and it's really focused on the facility visit. And it's something that I've done over the years. I know there are a few other organizations who have done it, but when you schedule a facility visit with any member of Congress, but freshmen is what we're talking about today, you can send a PAC check back to the district and state to present during the time of the visit. You certainly don't have to. It's never a requirement, but it's very effective because, members of Congress are they're always running to be reelected usually. The campaigning never stops. It takes money. I always say this. Dr. Stephen Billett at GW, George Washington University, is the one I heard this from first, but like he said, it takes money to run a business operation and it takes money to run a campaign. And so we have this negative connotation of money in politics, but you need resources to win a campaign, as members certainly know better than anyone else. And so they are constantly raising money. But when you do these visits, you can send a PAC check back to present at the time of the visit. Now, there are some requirements per the Federal Election Commission on timing. You send the checks, got to be sent. I mean, it needs to be timely. So it's labor intensive, but it is so worth it to send those checks back because the member of Congress gets a contribution, which they greatly appreciate. And then your association member or your employee at your corporation get a chance to hand over that money and do that face-to-face check presentation. And so obviously I would recommend you keep those opportunities to people who have given to your PAC. But it really can be a great fundraising strategy. If you make a contribution to the PAC, we're happy to send a check back for you to present on our behalf. And so I have found that to be extremely effective, both in raising money and then also forming these relationships. So think about good opportunities, and the pictures are great, to have a picture of the PAC presentation, the facility visit, then you put it in your PAC newsletter. I mean, you can just use it over and over. And so that's a very important part of the facility visit that I think oftentimes we don't really talk about much, because it is a lot of work and there are requirements around it, but it can be very effective when it's done the right way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that tip. That's great. That's the perfect way to end this episode. So thank you, Kelly, for your time and sharing all of these great insights. I've been making notes, and I know everyone who has been listening has been too. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. Make sure you're subscribed to get notified to new episodes and check out our other episodes in our library. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Liz. I really appreciate the opportunity. And don't forget the wonderful resources that are on the BIPAC portal about what we talked about today and so much more. So thanks again. It was great to be with you.
Yes, thank you.